Does the battery sort of die off?
I plugged the battery in all last night. I'm just hoping
Yeah.
this is working.
Sure, but you'd certainly get some audio if you had to do other graphics, and you could get me audio-wise.
I'm not going to worry.
Yes.
You know, at the end of the day, I'm a historian. I'm just really appreciating your stories about this
okay.
because it's giving me a fuller picture.
Okay. And I should be a better historian myself, amateur-wise,
to be.
to
You've done lots of other
recollecting
things in your life.
my memory.
Yeah. And it is, you know, like,
I could tell you one unique Vancouver 2010 story, if you'd like, of a resident from here. I know it's not valid, but if you, in your guidelines.
yeah, sure, yeah.
Okay. One of my most recent, shall I say, 2010 Olympic-sized memories that I certainly have permission to talk about. One of our residents, a quadriplegic in his early 30s from a mountain biking accident. Yes, he was to carry on Thursday, March 11th, 2010, the Paralympic torch. Now, being a quadriplegic, he wouldn't have been able to carry, but there was a stand set up on the side of his wheelchair, and this was to be downtown Vancouver. I wasn't assigned to work that day. My boss and one of our rec programmers went downtown Vancouver. Well, his ventilator malfunctioned, and we do have 20 residents on ventilators here at George Pearson Centre where I'm working now. For whatever reason, it malfunctioned, which initially when I heard that, I was so glad it wasn't me working that day. However, first responders, fire department actually it was, and they were in the vicinity of St. Paul's Hospital downtown Vancouver. All things worked out well. Sadly, he didn't carry the torch that day. So from a recreation therapy standpoint, I thought, what can we do for this resident to carry his, I called it, his virgin torch, because he didn't get to carry that torch that day. It hadn't been used. His family were from Nova Scotia, and they gave permission for media to come to George Pearson Centre in Vancouver, where I work. Nursing staff dressed the gentleman in his uniform, torch-carrying uniform. I, through my volunteer efforts during 2010, came in touch with a friend to this day, an occupational therapist from North Vancouver who had carried the torch that day herself. And I said, would you come and join us, mitts on and all, and in your uniform, bring your torch. Well, we did our own little mini torch relay out from Ward 2 at George Pearson Centre where he was housed, and along West 57th in through the parking lot. As many wheelchair residents that could join us did. We had refreshments afterwards on the ward, and his face, you could tell by his eyes and the countenance, his countenance, he was beaming inside. He couldn't talk, but we knew it was a red letter day, a red mitten day, we'll call it, for George Pearson Centre in Vancouver. And the Vancouver Courier came to cover the story, and there was a photo and an article, and that was just truly a highlight in the latter days of his living here. He's since passed away. But if recreation, if we can seize the moments at the time that's happening locally, go for it.
So, you know, one of the questions that my colleague wanted me to ask you was was her Moira's approach at George Derby and Valley View to work, like, did she use rehab as sort of involved in every aspect of people's lives, or was it sort of more scheduled rehab sessions? Do you understand that?
Like with Moira's and my work at George Derby Centre in Burnaby, truly often physiotherapists, occupational therapists will work with clients or the residents on scheduled times because of staffing ratios and the equipment they have. Indeed, people need to be scheduled for those appointments. But if we could tie in, especially at George Derby Centre, where the residents were housed in separate buildings, a distance from where physiotherapy department was, for instance, and our recreation center. If we knew a resident was making the trek down for their physio appointments, we would try and tie in with a recreation event or whatever was appropriate. So yes, melding together, keeping in mind the specific goals for the resident care plan, shall we call it, specific goals for the various departments to be working with the resident at that time and time of day. And I remember working indeed overtime, the odd evening event or weekend event, and especially with the war veterans, always I was working the stat holiday of November 11th.
Yes, yes. And so at Valley View, I understood that you would create a care plan that everybody would, all the different therapists would be involved in creating a care plan for somebody. Is that how it worked? Because I don't really know this stuff, right?
You know, even my memory is failing me somewhat just right now. But to this day, in the facility where I'm working now, yes, every profession, every team member has their input into the plan of care. And now from even the annual reviews and 6-month reviews for those in care, the recording notes are in a resident's chart, and more we're just switching from the handwritten paper to doing it online, and it certainly makes it easier updating it when it's online too.
I'm wondering, don't worry, because I'll be talking to other people and somebody's going to remember that part for me.
Yeah.
How the
Valley View.
Carrie Brooks seems to have a very clear memory
Okay.
at Valley View of some of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a couple of questions which are really about the, I guess they're, okay, but this was one that my colleague had. Do you think that rehab therapy or creative arts therapy, I don't know what you prefer to call it, can be an alternative to pharmaceutical medications?
Oh, absolutely. Of course. And Moira Jones was certainly a promoter of alternate therapies than just drugging someone out of their mind. And we do work in the care that I'm with now. Certainly the pharmacist is on the team and has the input, and I see more and more the MD, the doctors, listening to what the pharmacist has to say on even dosage, or can we eliminate this particular drug? I see it hasn't been used for a while. Can we take that off the resident profile? Indeed, in the past, I would say when there weren't the professionals trained in the various interdisciplinary approach, and there wasn't maybe funding to hire music therapists, recreation therapists, I guess for the nursing staff, perhaps pharmacological treatment and blotting people out was sadly the way it was. So nowadays, certainly having worked a long time ago and more recently, I see indeed how can I word it? Kind of, indeed, well, professionally, the minimizing any pharmacological drug treatment. Yeah, so that a resident can be as mentally alert as possible. And of course, such an individual treatment plan necessary. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I thought that was an interesting observation to think of and this is treatment, you were giving treatment,
We were.
but a different kind of treatment than the nurses would have been giving. Not that the nurses just handed out drugs or stuff. And I don't know what kind of pharmaceuticals would have been used at Valley View in
Yes.
the 1970s, or even at George Derby, what kind of medications. But I do know that there was quite a bit of medication out there for elderly people by the 1970s.
Yes, yes. And, you know, over the years, for opportunities for young people to pursue their profession of choice, there are more jobs available now. I think even provincially, for budgets for healthcare, those of us that look after the non-nursing care, primary care issues have gained a lot of respect because of what we've been able to do in taking over certain portions of a resident's day and how they spend their day and how they're challenged to be stimulated mentally, physical movement, the whole thing, and the area of interest from gardening to pet therapy and things like that.
Yeah. If, you know, if you had just putting yourself back in those early days, and as a young woman working with Moira at George Derby and working with Moira at Valley View, with people, with elderly people who had mental health issues. So putting yourself back in what you learned there and what you did there, what would you want to tell a person who is just going out into the field of working with elderly people? What lessons do you think that you learned there, or what did you see that worked?
The sky's the limit. Be as creative as possible. The rewards are huge if you're new into this field of working with those with mental health challenges. And from what I've learned over the years, if we can contribute to making even one day a little better for those who are challenged in this way, it's just so rewarding. And gain all the knowledge you can from your university professors, and be a leader in the field. Be creative, dream big. Yeah, the sky's the limit. I don't know if I answered that quite right.
That was lovely.
Okay.
I really hope this damn thing is working.
Okay.
I think
And one other thing, I don't
sure,
know
yeah.
whether this would come in at all, but with some of the new facilities being built for the 2010 Olympic Games, I actually took one of my residents here to a brand new facility. In fact, it wasn't even finished because the architectural banner was in the hallway, and my resident did not fit in the elevator. Do you want me to cover that at all?
I think we could leave that. But
Yes.
I guess, but you know, you might want to say something, because you obviously had limitations at George Derby. The space limited to the space shapes what the potential is.
Yes.
So what is, and I don't know what it was like at Valley View, but what would have been the perfect space at George, let's just say, because this is supposed to be about mental health, what would have been the perfect space at Valley View for residents?
Ideally, wouldn't it be nice if those needing health care in facilities had their own room, or maybe just one other roommate? Some people who truly tend to be loners are happy to be in a single room. Others may they may feel lonely and love to have a roommate. The housing scenario is certainly dictated by budgets, provincial budgets in healthcare. I'm not sure what the maximum was. I can't remember if there were maybe 4 to a room at a time. But I think we all need some individual space. And when you have moved from a home into a healthcare facility, I can't imagine if I had to downsize, right size, and give up all my little treasures and maybe not be able to take my favorite quilt or my favorite pillow with me. There are so many considerations that I've seen over the years that do address some of those issues. Those with dementia, maybe you can't leave things out on a shelf. They could be taken and walked off, and a resident might not know they've done that. I've seen newer facilities now built where a resident's treasures, a few of them, can be housed under glass coverage so they won't disappear. And I think those of us that work with those, with mental health challenges, if there's a safe environment, whether it's their own room, that can be as normalized as possible, that's something that those of us in this field should be considering, and I hope would be provided if I should ever need that level of care.
That's great. So Joy, is there anything else that we haven't talked about? Any other memories about Moira and about those pretty exciting projects for a young graduate?
I know I have somewhere at home a copy of a couple of, I don't know what we called it, but Moira established at George Derby Center, I believe, like a monthly newsletter, and had residents contribute to that. Now, for instance, if they couldn't write, one of us would be the scribe and take down their notes, and then if there was anyone that maybe had trouble reading it, we could assist them reading the George Derby news, whatever. When I took leave of absence for my rowing endeavors at the Olympic level, Moira did everything to encourage the residents to follow me from a distance. It was so sweet. And I can try and look up, I know I have them somewhere at home and maybe photocopy to send them to you, but that really touched my heart. Moira was able to incorporate, with my love and passion for Olympic competition, she got the residents of George Derby Center to embrace my journey too, and they loved it. In fact, often, once a week as a matter, when one resident was transferred back to Shaughnessy Hospital in Vancouver and ended up staying there for a little more acute care treatment, he would send out once a week 5 chocolate bars to me and a $2 donation, because he knew with my rowing endeavors that I needed all the extra calories possible, maybe not so much the sugar, but I love them. And that was so sweet. Through interdepartmental mail, this resident would send to me $2 plus about 5 chocolate bars. Well, I ended up indeed sharing the chocolate. I didn't need those chocolate bars that much, and I ended up sharing those. But it was really Moira's way of having my support team, where the residents I had left to pursue a selfish endeavor, but she involved them, and then a big welcome home. And I can certainly look up in my album somewhere where I've got a few of those George Derby Press, whatever it was called, and residents contributed to that.
So I'm also getting a sense of Moira as a professional who was willing to do a little blurring of that professional client divide in appropriate ways, right?
Very appropriate. Indeed, in healthcare, we often might, for very good reasons, keep our personal life very separate from residents we work with. But at George Derby Center, during my Olympic endeavors and training, Moira just thought, well, let's get these fellas supporting you, and that kind of thing. And it was fine by me. I certainly wasn't against that at all. I was okay with that, to have them involved in my cheering squad, and I'll photocopy some of those sentiments.
But I'm thinking too that she brought her dog in.
Yes.
That there's pictures of your husband at Valley View. you know, so
Yes.
there is a bit of a crossover, which